I watched my father sign the paper that was supposed to end my life. I wasn't supposed to see it. I wasn't supposed to hear anything. The doctors said I was in a coma, brain activity minimal, chances of waking up less than 5%. But I was there, trapped inside my own body, screaming without a voice, while my father stood over my hospital bed and told Dr. Matthews to let me die. "Let her go," he said. His voice was calm, cold, like he was discussing a business transaction. "We won't pay for the surgery." I remember every word, every pause, every breath. The pen scratched against paper. The DNR order: do not resuscitate. If my heart stopped, they would do nothing. If I crashed, they would step back and watch me fade. All because the surgery I needed, the one that could save my life, cost more than my father was willing to spend. I was 24 years old, his only daughter, and he signed my death warrant to save money. But I didn't die. 72 hours later, I opened my eyes. And when I did, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. I did something so much worse that within 24 hours, he lost everything. Let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Elena. I grew up in a house that looked perfect from the outside. Big colonial in the suburbs, 3-car garage, manicured lawn. My father, Richard Castellano, was a commercial real estate developer. Successful, wealthy, respected, and completely hollow inside. My mother died when I was 7. Cancer. I barely remember her, but I remember him after she was gone. He didn't grieve. He worked. He built his empire while I raised myself. Nannies came and went. I learned early that love wasn't something you could expect in our house. Money was the language. Control was the currency. By the time I was in college, I knew exactly who my father was. A man who valued his portfolio more than people. But I told myself it didn't matter. I built my own life. I was studying architecture, had a boyfriend named Marcus, had dreams that didn't include my father's shadow. Then the accident happened. I was driving home from campus on a rainy night in October. A truck ran a red light, T-boned my car at 60 miles per hour. The impact shattered my pelvis, fractured my skull, caused internal bleeding that nearly killed me before the ambulance arrived. I don't remember the crash. I remember waking up, not in a hospital room, but inside darkness, complete sensory deprivation. I could hear voices, but I couldn't move, couldn't open my eyes, couldn't speak. Locked-in syndrome, they call it, except I wasn't fully locked in. I was somewhere between consciousness and nothing, a prisoner in my own skull. The doctors explained my condition to my father. I heard every word through the fog. "She needs emergency surgery to relieve the pressure on her brain," Dr. Matthews said. "Without it, she'll likely die within the week. With it, her chances improve significantly, maybe 60–70% survival rate." How much? My father's voice. Flat, businesslike. The surgery, the ICU care, the rehabilitation if she survives. We're looking at around $400,000, possibly more, depending on complications. Silence. I waited for him to say yes, to say do whatever it takes, to say she's my daughter, save her. Instead, he said, "And if we don't do the surgery?" I felt my world tilt. Dr. Matthews cleared his throat. "Mr. Castellano, without the surgery, your daughter will die. It's not a question of if, but when. But it would be natural, peaceful. I suppose, yes, we can keep her comfortable. But Mr. Castellano, what's her insurance coverage?" "The insurance will cover about 60%. You'd be responsible for approximately $160,000 out of pocket." Another pause. Then my father said the words that carved themselves into my soul. "That's a lot of money for a 5% chance." I wish that was the worst part. Dr. Matthews tried. I'll give him credit. He pushed back. He explained that I was young, that medicine isn't certain, that miracles happen. My father listened patiently. Then he asked about the DNR. "If we sign a do not resuscitate order," my father said, "and her heart stops, you won't intervene." Correct. But, and that would save us from additional costs. The resuscitation, the extended care. "Mr. Castellano, I strongly advise against this. Your daughter is young. She has a fighting chance. Doctor, I'm a practical man. I deal in numbers. 5% is not a fighting chance. It's a lottery ticket, and I don't buy lottery tickets. The pen scratched, the paper rustled, and I screamed inside my silent body until I thought I'd shatter. But that was only the beginning. For 3 days, I floated in that darkness. Nurses came and went. They talked around me like I was already gone. My father visited once, stood at the foot of my bed for maybe 2 minutes, didn't touch me, didn't speak to me, just checked his phone and left. Marcus came. My boyfriend sat beside me, held my hand, cried. He begged me to wake up, told me he loved me, told me we had plans, a future, a life to build. I tried so hard to squeeze his hand, to give him any sign, but my body was a tomb. On the third night, something changed. I felt a flutter, a tiny spark of connection between my brain and my fingers. I focused every ounce of will I had into that one finger. Move, move, move. It twitched. A nurse saw it, called the doctor. Within an hour, I was having tests, brain activity increasing, responsive to stimuli. The miracle they said wouldn't happen was happening. By morning, I opened my eyes. The hospital room was blindingly bright, sterile. Dr. Matthews stood over me with an expression of genuine shock and joy. "Elena," he said softly, "can you hear me? Blink if you can hear me." I blinked. "You're awake. You're going to be okay." But I wasn't okay, because the first clear thought in my head wasn't relief or gratitude. It was rage. My father arrived an hour later. He walked in like he was visiting a business associate, smiled, patted my hand. "Sweetheart," he said, "what a scare you gave us. Thank God you pulled through." I stared at him, couldn't speak yet. My throat was raw from the tubes, but I stared with every ounce of hatred I could summon. He didn't notice, or didn't care. "The doctors say you'll need physical therapy, some rehab, but you're young. You'll bounce back." He paused. "I've already spoken to the billing department. We'll work out a payment plan for the costs incurred." Costs incurred. Not, "I'm so glad you're alive." Not, "I was wrong." Just costs. That's when I knew. I wasn't going to confront him. I wasn't going to cry and ask why he tried to let me die. Words wouldn't touch a man like Richard Castellano, but actions would. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital recovering, learning to walk again, regaining my speech. The whole time, I played the role of grateful daughter. I thanked my father for visiting, smiled when he brought flowers, let him tell his friends and colleagues about my miraculous recovery. And while I smiled, I planned. See, there were things about my father's business that I knew. Things he thought I didn't pay attention to, but I'd grown up in that house. I'd heard phone calls, seen documents left on his desk, absorbed information the way children do when they're invisible to their parents. My father's empire was built on leverage, high-risk commercial real estate deals funded by investors who trusted his reputation. He was always 1 or 2 deals away from either massive profit or complete collapse. It's how he operated. Aggressive, ruthless, and recently, he'd made a very aggressive bet. 6 months before my accident, my father had invested nearly everything into a massive mixed-use development downtown. Shopping, offices, luxury condos. $150 million project. He'd leveraged his existing properties, taken on enormous debt, and brought in investors who expected a huge return. The project was his legacy play, the deal that would cement his name in the city's history. But it had problems. I knew because I'd helped him with some of the early research. Before he decided I was more useful as an unpaid intern than a daughter. The zoning permits were shaky. The environmental reviews had red flags. The primary anchor tenant, a major retailer, was reconsidering their commitment. My father had smoothed everything over with money and connections, but the foundation was fragile, and I was about to shatter it. What happened next changed everything. The day I was discharged from the hospital, Marcus picked me up. He'd been incredible through everything, visiting every day, bringing me books, holding my hand. He didn't know what my father had done. I hadn't told him, hadn't told anyone. This was going to be private. "You okay?" Marcus asked as we drove away from the hospital. I looked at the building disappearing in the rearview mirror, the place where I'd died and been reborn. I'm perfect, I said. That night, I started making calls. First, I called my father's lead investor on the downtown project, a man named Thomas Chun. Old money, conservative, risk-averse. I'd met him at company dinners. He liked me, thought I was smart. Mr. Chun, I said when he answered, it's Elena Castellano. I'm so sorry to bother you. Elena, I heard about your accident. How are you feeling? Better, thank you. Actually, that's why I'm calling. The accident gave me a lot of time to think about my future, about my father's business. I paused for effect. I'm worried, Mr. Chun. Worried? About what? About the downtown project. I don't know if my father has been fully transparent with you about some of the challenges we're facing. Silence. What kind of challenges, Elena? I told him about the zoning issues, the environmental concerns, the anchor tenants' cold feet. All true. All things my father had buried under layers of optimism and misdirection. I thought you should know, I said quietly, as someone who has money invested. My father, he's very good at selling a vision, but sometimes he doesn't see the cracks until it's too late. I appreciate you calling, Chin said. His voice had gone cold. I'll look into this. He hung up. I smiled. One down. Over the next week, I systematically dismantled my father's credibility. I called 3 more major investors. I sent anonymous tips to a journalist who'd been sniffing around the project. I reached out to the anchor tenant's corporate office and expressed concerns as a private citizen about the development's environmental impact. I didn't lie. I didn't need to. I just illuminated the truth my father had been hiding. The dominoes started falling fast. Chun pulled his investment, $20 million gone overnight. The other investors panicked and followed. The journalist published an exposé about the project's troubled permits. The anchor tenant officially backed out. Within 10 days, my father's legacy project was dead. But I had no idea this decision would destroy them completely, because when the project collapsed, the banks came calling. My father had leveraged everything, his office buildings, his residential properties, even his personal assets. He'd been so certain of success that he'd bet it all. Now the bet was lost. The foreclosure notices started arriving. His properties went into default. His investors filed lawsuits. The business that had taken him 30 years to build began to crumble in real time. And through it all, I played the concerned daughter. I visited him at his office as the walls closed in, brought him coffee, asked if there was anything I could do to help. He looked 10 years older, gray, exhausted, broken. I don't understand what happened, he said, staring at the foreclosure notice on his desk. Everything fell apart so fast. Markets are unpredictable, I said gently. You taught me that. He nodded, rubbed his eyes. I'm going to lose everything. Elena, the company, the house, everything. I'm so sorry, Dad. He looked at me then, really looked at me. And for a moment, I thought he might see it. The calculation in my eyes. The satisfaction behind my sympathy. But he didn't. At least you're okay, he said quietly. At least I didn't lose you too. I wanted to laugh, to scream, to tell him he'd tried to lose me, that he'd literally signed the paperwork to let me die. Instead, I hugged him. It's going to be okay, I whispered. It wasn't. 60 days after I woke from my coma, my father declared bankruptcy. The house was seized. The cars were repossessed. His reputation was destroyed. The man who'd built an empire on ruthless calculation had been outcalculated by his own daughter. But karma was already watching. The final blow came from a place I didn't expect. Marcus and I were having dinner when I got the call. A lawyer. Someone I didn't know. Ms. Castellano, this is Robert Jennings. I represent the estate of your late mother, Catherine Castellano. I froze. My mother's estate? She died 17 years ago. Yes, I'm calling because we've recently discovered some assets that were held in trust for you. Your mother set up a fund before she died. She wanted to make sure you'd be taken care of. I don't understand. My father never mentioned. Your father was the trustee. He was supposed to turn the funds over to you when you turned 21. He didn't. Instead, He's been using the money for his business ventures. The world tilted. How much money? With interest and investment growth over the past 17 years? Approximately $4.2 million. I couldn't breathe. My mother had left me a fortune. Enough to pay for 100 surgeries. Enough to guarantee my care, my future, my life. And my father had stolen it. We're filing suit to recover the funds. Jennings said, given your father's current financial situation, we should be able to reclaim most of it. But I wanted you to know. I thanked him, hung up, sat in silence. Marcus reached for my hand. Elena, what is it? I told him everything. The DNR, the coma, the money, all of it. He stared at me. You destroyed his business. On purpose. Yes. Because he tried to let you die. Yes. And now you find out he stole your inheritance too. I nodded. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he said, good. We got married 6 months later. My father wasn't invited. I recovered the money my mother left me. Used it to finish my degree. Started my own architecture firm. Built a life that had nothing to do with Richard Castellano's shadow. He ended up in a small apartment across town, working as a consultant for a fraction of what he used to make. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd aged badly, that he was bitter, that he blamed everyone but himself. I never spoke to him again. People asked me sometimes if I felt guilty, if I regretted what I did, if destroying my father's life made me as cold as he was. I always gave them the same answer. He taught me that love has a price, that family is a transaction, that some people aren't worth saving if the cost is too high. I just applied his lessons better than he did. The last time I saw him was by accident. A coffee shop downtown. He was sitting alone, reading a newspaper, looking small and forgotten. He didn't see me. I stood there for a moment, watching the man who'd signed my death warrant to save $160,000. The man who'd stolen $4 million from his dead wife to fund his ego. The man who'd lost everything because he never understood that some debts can't be calculated in dollars. I walked past without saying a word. Some people say revenge is a dish best served cold. They're wrong. Revenge is best served when they never see it coming, when they destroy themselves trying to figure out what went wrong, when they die 1,000 small deaths, realizing that the person they underestimated was the architect of their ruin. My father spent his life teaching me that people are investments, that you cut your losses when the return isn't worth it. I was his worst investment and his most expensive loss. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who should have loved you, this one's for you. Subscribe if you believe some debts get paid in full.